Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the American Scousers Fantasy Premier League show. I am Gally here in Massachusetts, and I am with my guest and host, Matus. How are you, my friend?
Doing well. Happy to be back on the air. I know it's been a couple weeks, so all of you people who have been patiently awaiting our coming back, we are here, so you can rejoice.
By rejoice, I mean you should probably listen to us, do the opposite, and we'll see how
And
things go.
Doing well.
We're going to get into our moves and some of the mistakes we made, maybe some of the things that we did that worked out well in the last double game week. But we're going to start, as we always do, with the standings in our American Scouser Cup. And nice to see Pep rebounded a little bit at the end of this match week, finishing at 1,297 points, still in the top 2,000, top 1,600 overall, 1,576, and that's out of 11,095,092 people. It's just absolutely ridiculous. But I thought that we should also acknowledge that King of the Clop, who is down in 10th place, right, at 1,206, they're in the top 236,000 of the entire world, which is still the top 2% overall, which is pretty impressive for what we have in our little old American Scouser Cup. So it'll be interesting to see if Pep can hold on to that lead and if Darwinism or Guns and Nunez find their way back to the top. It'll be an interesting run down to the final. We always then go to our contributor league where you pulled out one, man. I got to tell you, when I saw it at the beginning of the match week, I thought she was going to beat you.
There were only two other people I could have played to receive a win, and I am just so grateful that I was not paired up with anybody else because I would have had another loss on my record. But yeah, this is great. I'm still flying high, top of the league. I love it.
The fact that she was second and has been just crushing for weeks, and then she goes up against you. It's like you're basically Polish kryptonite.
Better to be lucky than good, is what I say.
Well, I can't go off this screen without acknowledging one of these match week scores, and I think that has to be my Monday co-host and the actual host of our podcast and leader of this whole American Scouser shenanigans that we have, which is Timuchin Uris. And it was a nice win by VJ, just smacking around the leader a little bit. And I thought about it, we made fun of VJ a little bit because, well, as we talked about how our 10th place person is in the top 2%. VJ right now is exactly 9.7 million out of the game, which is the top 87%, which is, and I think if you actually aggregated the people who started the game when it began, he would be in about the 95th percentile. But he has wins against Timuchin, Paul, and a draw against me. So he clearly just shows up for the Monday Night Podcast. His other point is because the Queen decided to die after all these years, and they canceled matches, and they gave all of us a draw. That's ridiculous. So to VJ, thank you for starting to play again, my friend. And more than anything, thank you for beating Timuchin last week. Our standings overall, we don't have to stay on this very long. The co-host is in number one spot. Really dominant position, second or third overall in the scoring, which is great too. But Kelly's right on his tail, or at least as close as anyone is, and then followed quickly by Scott, Jamie, and myself. But I think he has us on the stronghold. So before we start talking about last week and what we did, you've obviously been able to kind of spend a week or two now stewing in some moves. So I thought I would open the mic up, open the floor up for you to let the listeners know exactly what you did to torpedo your rankings in the standings.
What I did is classic overthinking. Classic, hey, I need to make a move, otherwise I'm not doing enough. Classic, oh, look at this guy that I've liked in the past. He should do well for me. Here's the thing, guys. If you're ever thinking about transferring in Luka Dean, slap yourself in the face and don't do it. Because chances are you're going to do it at the wrong time and it's going to backfire massively, which is what happened to me. I transferred him in, took it for it as well, and then they give up goals left and right, and then he goes down in the 9th minute this last game. I was at work, I believe, and I saw that Aston Villa had a clean sheet going, and I saw that Luca Digne was subbed out, and I was thinking, awesome. That's 6 points right there. He was subbed out just in time. Hopefully he made the 61st minute. I'm good. And I checked to see, and I don't see any recent subs. I'm like, what the hell is going on? I scroll a bit longer down, and I see that he was subbed out in the 9th minute, and then now he's done for weeks. So that's one thing. Another thing was taking out Kulusevski, which wasn't a great move by me. Granted, I did take him out for Rashford, so it's kind of in a net balance. Rashford did score one more point, so it wasn't terrible, but I could have definitely brought on Rashford for someone else rather than Kulusevski, even after me being so high on Kulusevski the whole year, I feel. So it's just a classic case of just thinking that I have to do a move to benefit me while knowing that if I would have just stood put, it would have been fine. That like the week when Ben White was on my bench, Arsenal cleaned or Ben White was subbed out and then they gave up a couple goals. But had I just kept Ben White in and not transferred out for Dean, everything would have been fine, would have had an extra transfer. And so this is all just common, stupid overthinking that I always go through.
We've all been there, but you have been wallowing in it for about 10 days. So I figured you had to get it off your chest to the listeners. I've made some mistakes myself. And last week, we'll look at our teams and I'll mention some of the things I did. I was happy with my double move. I had the 2 free transfers. So I moved off Darwin and I moved off Cancelo, which turned out to be good moves on all fronts. And I brought in Doherty and Kane, trying to play the double game week. I tried to ride with Spurs. It worked out because I had Kulusevski and Kane did, get a return in the last match. And he really could have returned in both. So I was comfortable with Harry Kane. And now I'm left with Kane, Haaland, and De Bruyne. And that's not something to complain about right now with how the fixtures land. But obviously, Doherty only scoring 1 point, having De Bruyne on a double game week where they only play him once is just classic Pep sticking in your eye. I had another draft earlier in the week where I hadn't brought in Kane, where I was going to drop down to a lesser striker and also bring in Mahrez, which clearly would have been a good move at this point. But I really hate playing the Pep roulette in midfield. De Bruyne is really the only player I feel that is safe other than Haaland right now, especially now that Cancelo is no longer an option in defense. And if you still have Cancelo, you're just wasting 7 point whatever they still charge you for him.
7.1.
And soon it'll be in the 6s.
Yep.
And that's what I hate. It's just a wasted transfer. So I was happy I got him out. I'm sitting on a transfer now. We'll talk about our moves for this week later. But the overall frustration that I just had with the double match week was just that, United didn't really fire. And then you have Martial play a portion of the match week. You have Shaw basically play 2 really good matches and not get a clean sheet.
Yep.
It's just an awkward overall time for people that made a lot of extra transfers. So while we look at the transfers leading into match week 21, we'll look at the players coming in. Tony Odegaard, obviously the soup du jour, Sully Marsh, Rashford, of course, and Shaw. Surprises here? Someone else you think might have shown up here?
I don't. Maybe Kulusevski might have cracked that list for me because he's not owned by that many players where I thought that maybe if there were enough that were bringing him in, that he would be able to crack this list, but not necessarily any surprises. I think, looking at overall points, I keep thinking about why I don't have Odegaard, and I don't really know why. I know when we spoke, this was one of the first episodes, we talked about some Arsenal assets, and we really liked Odegaard, both of us, but we felt like he was more. He made more of a difference on the field than in fantasy because he was one of those hockey assist guys where he was setting up the guy before the play. Whereas now it is apparent that he is the guy. I mean, he isn't the hockey assist guy. He's the guy. So sitting at 6.8, and he has the most points out of anyone besides Kane and Haaland this year, and Trippier. Those are the only three players that have more points than him all season. And at 6.8, you can think about dropping down from someone like Mo if you really want to take some extra money elsewhere. If you want to have one of your strikers go up to Kane, you go down from Mo to Odegaard and then go up from whoever you have to Kane. That could be a brilliant move. In terms of Tony, I think we're starting to see that he's really not going to face that ban yet. So I think a lot more people are now comfortable with bringing him in because we see that he's scoring. And if it's not going to be official anytime soon that he's going to miss matches, then why not have him in because he's a decent option at that amount. Mitrovic, with him missing penalties, he's becoming a more shaky option. It's just kind of become really annoying. I mean, it's what, third penalty that he's missed this year, technically. And so those are points that really, really can hurt you. And so I think I see that a bit there. I think one that I'm a little surprised to not crack the list as well, and kind of like to see your opinions on it, is Rico Lewis for City. Like, do you think he is a viable option going forward? Like, do you think there's enough there where we see him on a regular basis, or is this just Pep just having fun for a couple weeks? Like, what is going on there?
Yeah, so I'm with you on Rico Lewis. I think Rico Lewis and Akanji are both players I thought I'd probably see on this list for their price and their like buy-in value. The fact that a kid from Dortmund got bought for 15 million at the end of the transfer window, and it is keeping out last year's player of the year at City, in Diaz out of the lineup is just kind of nutty. Like, it really does surprise me. And Nathan Ake, a kid who Bournemouth sold, like, it just doesn't make sense to me. And that's what Pep does. At the same time, I also think there's some Cancelo. I think Cancelo left for the World Cup thinking he was going to become a star. Got to the World Cup and realized he wasn't going to play, down tools, and got mentally lost. And I think when he came back, he probably trained that way a little bit. And Pep doesn't handle that. Like, Pep doesn't roll you out there when you're not playing well to figure out your form. You have to figure out your form on training pitch with Pep. You know, as Liverpool supporters, as this podcast knows, we know our manager will roll you out there at your worst to figure out. And so it's his way of getting you back to your best. Right. And I think Pep's way of getting you back to your best is either criticizing you in the media or making you play like, I mean, he subbed Cancelo on in a like 88th minute of a 4-1 win to a guy who has basically been his first name on the team sheet for 2 years before. That's a statement. Like, that's a mental this. Like, my grandmother used to look out the window and literally, like, if you didn't come inside and like kiss the ring and hang out enough, she'd catch you in the window, like walking out and run into your car, and she would literally do this. Like, this is like a 5'0" Italian woman telling you to go bleep yourself, like, in every essence of the word. And that's almost what Pep does to his players, right? Like, he strong arms them. So I can understand Rico there, but I also think it could be a message to Cancelo, and then it's his job again. Yeah. So I don't know that Rico's the best option in the low price. I honestly think if I was going to bring in a cheap defender right now, it'd probably be Serge Aurier. Forrest's numbers are unbelievable. They have a great set of fixtures. He has basically gotten bonus points, I think, in 3 of the last 4 matches that he's appeared in, which basically means he's outplaying everyone. I think in the last match, Johnson got 2 goals and Gibbs White got 2 assists, and Aurier still got 2 bonus points, which basically lets you know he's doing things underlying in numbers that are just really, really great in the attacking third. So I also believe he's 4.5, and if you look at their fixtures, there are at least 2 or 3 clean sheets opportunities in it. So I think Serge Aurier would be a much better option than maybe going low on a City asset, and the fact that City are just conceding weak goals. I mean, they should have beat Tottenham 7-0, and instead they were down 2-0. So I want to go back to Odegaard though, real quick. You made a great comment. We were both high on his ability, but not on his fantasy appeal. I'm gonna say something that sounds crazy, but I'm gonna be totally honest with it. I think Martin Odegaard right now is better than Kevin De Bruyne. I think Martin Odegaard right now is the Premier League player of the year.
He's the best midfielder by far in the league.
He might be the best midfielder in the world. And it's funny. When was the last time you could say,
oh God,
what are you going to tell me? It's Luka Modric? Honestly.
No.
But it's not Kevin De Bruyne.
No, it's not.
I mean,
not,
if you think
not right now.
it,
not right now.
That's my point. He might be. And the crazy part is there might be a moment in the next year or two where Galley's stupid comment on January 20th of Martin Odegaard being the best midfielder in the world might ring true. We lost Matouche, but he'll be back shortly as soon as he gets back connected. I'm going to bring him back now. There you are.
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
I could still hear you, but it just...
I paused myself at that moment. There will be a time, I believe, in the next few years, if it isn't now, where he is the best midfielder in the world. And it will be hilarious to say that Real Madrid sold the best midfielder in the world for less than 30 million. And it's actually maybe the greatest testament of what Arsenal's recruitment has done is they not only brought him in on loan, they convinced him when he had played great and Madrid wanted to keep him. But Arsenal had the option, but he had to agree to the permanent move. Yeah. And he did it. And then Arteta hands him the armband, and it makes so much sense. Like, he saw in him that he had this player. And then he really, like, he honed it in. And now the kid's turning out to not only be a great player, but he's turning out to be a great fantasy asset. I think Tony is an absolute stud at 7.5 or 7.6 or whatever he is. He scores all their goals. He doesn't miss penalties. If you question whether it'll be suspended, I think we know now it won't happen till the summer.
Yeah.
So if I'm you, I would jump on Tony if you can fit him into your side. I have too many strikers at the high end. Sully Marsh for me is a sell low. I just feel like everyone's buying him because he's had great weeks. He's had double returns 2 weeks in a row and had a single return the other week in the last 3 game weeks. That can't keep up for a guy who only has 3 Premier League goals before it.
Yeah.
So for me, that's a useless one. Rashford and Shaw are interesting. And I'm going to bring down the graphic because I want to actually like kind of focus in on the conversation. I don't know if you saw today's announcement from Ben Crellin. And anyone who doesn't know, Ben Crellin is a fantasy Premier League fan. He created a really, really great algorithm and spreadsheets that help fantasy Premier League managers basically look at fixtures and their overall complexity. He also is maybe the single best prognosticator when it comes to double game weeks. And he had a big tweet today stating that he believes that as long as, and I'm going to look down at my notes so I don't get this wrong, as long as Manchester United does not draw at home against Reading and Leeds don't draw away against Bournemouth or Accrington Stanley, both those sides will have double game weeks in 22. That's only 2 weeks away. Yeah. So United would end up with, and this is a triple captain exclaimer, people, bring in Bruno Fernandes is basically what Galley's telling you. Palace and Leeds at home. Woof. Don't get rid of Rashford, my buddy.
Yeah. Oh, definitely not planning on doing that.
But on the other side, Leeds ends up with Forest and United away, which isn't the worst double fixture you could have. And Leeds assets are starting to come on, and there's some players there we could talk about. So before we look at the transfers out for this week, do you think that late announcement today about that double game week in 22, and it was kind of a shocker, might have had some bearing on the high influx we see in at least Shaw, if not Rashford and Shaw?
Yeah, I think fantasy players we're quite the reactionary bunch. You know, you see something happen and you immediately go and try and either rectify that or go off of that and make another decision. And so seeing news like that, especially with the appeal of how much better they've been playing too this year. You know, granted they drew against Palace with that Elise free kick. Without that free kick, though, I mean they're winning lots of games here recently. So I think part of that, especially because we saw them towards the bottom and just crack about that 200,000 to 400,000 transfer in spot. I feel like those amounts are reactionary amounts. The amounts where it's higher, where we see like Tony's and Odegaard's, where it's in 600, 700, 800,000, are many people changing their team to make sure they can get those guys in. Whereas these 200,000 to 300,000 transfers in recently are more of the reaction to that statement and to having the double game week. Because I know I was looking at the fixture difficulty planner and I see, United has Arsenal away and then Palace at home, Leeds at home, and then Leeds away. So they play Leeds twice in the next 3 game weeks. So it's one of those things where it just, especially knowing that's probably why a lot of people are trying to jump on that train, because they want to get there before the price possibly goes up. Because if that news comes out and a lot of people want to jump on the United train, they're going to get in the likes of Shaw, Bruno, and Rashford. And if you don't go quick enough, you're going to lose 0.1 or 0.2 million, depending on how late you are to the party.
It's a great point about the pricing. It seems like as we move into these double match weeks and double game weeks, specifically as Europe comes back as well, it's going to be so important to have cheap defenders. They're just not scoring enough. You mentioned earlier when you rattled off the top scorers in the overall game, and we only had Trippier, and I think it's the top 5 or 6. Like, it's just not even close where we've had in past years. And the Liverpool fullbacks not scoring is a big part of that.
Yeah.
But as we look at the players going out this week, not a big surprise for me that Trossard was going out. And it's funny they already have his club shown as Arsenal. We can maybe touch on that after this segment. Let's touch on our opinions of the move after this. But
yep.
Trossard being out makes total sense. Guy hasn't started. I think it's 2 or 3 Premier League matches. My new favorite manager in the entire world, De Zerbi, absolutely just taking a flamethrower to a player who down tools and showed no respect for the club that brought him to England, took him out of a small country with basically no recognition. Got him to a point where he could start at a World Cup for a team that's just a fraud in itself in Belgium. And then decided like he was too good for the club because he didn't like the formation or the tactics that the manager played, that is getting more points per game than any other manager in the Premier League since he started there. We'll clearly I have some opinions. We'll get back to Trossard. Talk to me about Mitrovic. I know you mentioned his missed penalties, but his big goal conversion rate is still like 2nd or 3rd in the overall Premier League. He's up there near the top of the Golden Boot race, and he plays for a club that's going to play him every minute of every important match. Like, how can 323,000 people want to move off? Like, is there someone I'm missing?
Well, I'm going to be 323,221, honestly, because I
this
think
is me saying this.
Yeah, I know. This is really weird. This is like a role reversal here. Like, what has happened this year? This is a wild year. Galley is defending Mitrovic. The world is ending, my friends. We shouldn't be listening to this. This is just
Crash.
blasphemy. I think, I think, especially for me, this last match week with that penalty debacle, I think is was the last straw. And looking at their fixtures, they have Spurs at home, they have Chelsea away, and Forest at home. So not necessarily the worst fixtures, but they're not great either. I think Spurs and Chelsea could keep them to a clean sheet, and so I think some people are just not really not feeling too great about that. And I think anyone who's moving to Tony is moving off of Mitrovic. So I think those are kind of where the numbers are overlapping, where you have, maybe 200,000 of those 300,000 moving to Tony, and that way they have that replacement there. Because I know that's something that I'm contemplating, and I know we can talk about it later, but I'm just contemplating just going full wild card because I don't like where I'm at right now. And I know it could be a little risky,
a little early,
and it could be kind of crazy to mention because of the potential other double game weeks going on. But I just right now I feel like I need at least 3 moves to get myself to a place where I can like this team. But yeah, we'll see what
we'll
happens
look at
there.
your team in a bit.
Yeah.
You only have 1 free transfer, right?
Yeah.
All right. We'll get there when we look at the team. I think it's a great conversation. And listen, there are a lot of people that have ripped the wild card ripcord already. I personally feel it's a bad subscription at this point because there's going to be double game weeks. There's going to be blank game weeks. I think a wild card is about like 6 to 8 week preparation if you do it right. And for that, I think it's too early in the second half to make that move yet. But if you have to do it, I will respect it and then criticize it and ridicule it the following week. Cancelo makes total sense to me, not, getting transferred out. Doesn't make any sense, honestly, to have him at this point because City aren't keeping clean sheets and he costs a ton of money and he hasn't had attacking returns, I think, since match week 14. Salah and Martinelli. What are your thoughts here?
I think with Mo, again, this is one of those things where he just hasn't returned in the last 3 games, right? So for someone to spend that much money on a guy who isn't returning once at least every other game, but now not even returning every 3 games, and kind of seeing that the club still isn't really up to where it wants to be, kind of taking away that risk and spending that money elsewhere. Another one of those potentials, like I was talking about, maybe moving Salah down to a cheaper mid and then moving up to a Kane in the forward spot. I could see that being a big play there. And then Martinelli, I think part of it could be based off of the Trossard news, because I think some people are worried that that's going to be the switch that happens, that Trossard is going to play more for Martinelli. I don't think that's personally going to happen. I don't know if I know you said we're going to get into it. I figured now that we've got to Arsenal, we can kind of go back to that. I like the money they spent on Trossard. I feel like it's a decent amount of money for someone who is already in the Premier League, who is able to count towards those homegrown numbers and who has experience in the league. I think, 34 million was it? Not bad at all. But I don't quite know where he's going to fit. I know that he's at times he can be positionless. You can kind of play him around a little bit, but I don't necessarily see him meshing well up top in Jesus's role or in Nketiah's role. And then I don't see him being better than Martinelli at what Martinelli does and what he's done this year on that left wing. So for me, I don't see where he fits in well, but then I can see why people are moving off of Martinelli because they're worried about Trossard because they don't know what's going to happen to Martinelli. So that's the only thing I can see based off that.
Yeah, Martinelli hasn't actually delivered in a few matches, and I think that's part of it. I think the other part is that Martinelli is an easy move if you have a few extra million in the bank to get to Rashford. And right now, Rashford looks like the informed player under 7 million. So that was Martinelli for so long. He was just a gem. You just wouldn't get rid of him. I think value has probably kept him on teams and in sides for a longer period. So here's my thing with Trossard. I think that Leandro Trossard is an amazing talent. I also think he's a head case. And I think that the Brighton manager realized it and wanted to run them out. There were reports that he had issues in the Belgium camp at times by like demanding for different play and expecting to play. Like he basically thought he was Kevin De Bruyne and shouldn't be like up there with him in the attacking mindset of their midfield attack. That to me is troubling when you're coming into a side that everything is working and looks like they have this like perfect team chemistry of everything going on. And my argument is if any of the front three or any of the wingers, whether it be Saka or Martinelli, isn't available, I feel that Emil Smith Rowe is a better player than Trossard.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you give him, when he was playing, he looked like he was going to be what Saka became, which is Arsenal's best player. If it's not Odegaard. And I'm going to vomit in my mouth because I've just basically found 5 different kids under the age of like 28 that are Arsenal's best players.
Under 24, not under 28. Even worse.
Yeah, that just took 4 more years of my life off. Like, it bothers me. Like, I say this all the time. People are like, "Are you afraid United's going to get good again?" And I tell people, no. I'm afraid Arsenal will get good again. But if Arsenal gets good again, the people actually come out. Because, like, United fans show up even when they're bad. And they're just annoying, and they're in the club, and they're in the bar, and they just talk, and they just rah, rah, and they're a terrible team, and they still like act like they're United, right? But when Arsenal supporters are great, they're unbearable because they know what it's like to not only be great but like play great football. And that's what they're doing right now. I mean, I hate Mikel Arteta. I've been banging on his attitude and all the things I thought he was doing to hold his players back. And it actually showed in the last couple of years with them not qualifying for Champions League, coming up short at big amounts in cups. But he's turned the corner. Maybe he's figured out a little bit of that managerial sense. Maybe he's figured out how to hone his own attitude. So I personally think I might take my second hit of the whole season, finally transfer out James, take the money, and move from Martinelli to Rashford. It'll be hard for me because I've had Martinelli since the beginning, so I'll be losing some value in my squad by doing it if I ever want to bring him back. But I really feel like with the announcement of the possibility, and I genuinely believe both those teams will win those matches against Reading and the Accrington Stanley Bournemouth winner. I feel like having Rashford in for the Arsenal match, which I think I have this weird feeling it's going to be like a 3-3 draw between United and Arsenal. Like I think it's going to be kind of a shootout. And I really want to have a piece of United's attack. And I don't know that I can stomach getting rid of KDB with a double game week coming in a couple weeks, even though Pep only gave me one this time. So I think I'm gonna make the move from Martinelli to Rashford and then possibly bring in an alternate for James. I'll just have to figure out what, $4.5-5 million defender that is, even though I want to shoot Doherty for only playing one match and getting 1 point in the entire thing. So we move on to your squad, my friend.
Yes, and all of its glory.
I know you hate it. Talk to me about what you could do with it, and if you wild card it, how many of these players would you remove?
If I wild carded, I would be removing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, at least. So it would change the entire makeup of my team quite a bit. If I do hold on to the wild card, which I most likely should, what I'm basically looking to do. Go ahead.
No, I was about to say you're going to.
Which I'm going to. I feel like I'm gonna be the crazy person and hold on to Darwin, and I'm gonna move down from Mo to a mid somewhere, maybe in that Odegaard range, and then bump Mitro up to Kane, and then have kind of a 3-4-3 situation. Because I think if Darwin does come back and he's playing, then then I can have that chance against. I mean, I feel like this match against Chelsea tomorrow morning, or morning for us. For some reason, I know it's an early match, and I know that Liverpool always struggles so much in those early matches. For some reason, I feel like the agent of chaos is going to create so much havoc with that Chelsea back line. I feel pretty good about it. And saying that, I mean, he's probably going to headbutt someone and get a red card. But I feel confident enough to keep him in my starting lineup. So I think maybe I just stick to that, keep him there. And then, if he doesn't play, then I'll have someone like Andreas Pereira that can then, fill that role to get auto subbed in if need be. My only concern is if I move just Salah down to mid and then Mitro up to Kane, is that I don't know if I have 3 playable defenders, because I've got White, Dean, Cancelo, Williams, and Trippier. Cancelo, if he doesn't play, leaves me with Ben White and Kieran Trippier for the only 2 that will actually play. And that's not a good recipe for any success. So I don't know if I should, take an 8-point hit to then take Cancelo down to a playable defender.
No. As much as I want to keep beating you, and I have moved ahead of you in the standings finally again, 8-point hits are honestly, like, if it's not like a triple game week, if it's not I'm taking an 8-point hit and I'm playing my bench boost and I have 22 fixtures, it's a bad decision. It's always a bad. Your 8 points moves you down like 500,000 to almost 1 million places.
Just right off the
get. It's just you can't. I honestly would tell you, and I'm going to bring in a comment in a moment from one of our listeners that I think is very apropos and we should talk about, but I don't think you need to make moves. I could genuinely, honestly look at this team and say there is an argument. If you're comfortable with Darwin, there's my thing. If you're not moving Darwin out, there's an argument you could start this team next week and keep both your transfers. And hear me out. You don't want to waste a wild card. This side needs surgery.
Right.
Which means you almost need to stem out a week to get 2 transfers so you can make your 3 transfers to make the real critical move you need. Take your double game week next week and unite it. Why am I helping you with all this shit? And then
because we're friends.
And we are. And not take out and only take a -4, honestly. I mean, really, if you're thinking about you're talking about making a -8 this week or taking your wild card out of the equation, which we know we've talked about all year long. The chips are what matters.
Yeah.
It's proper utilization of the chips that finishes you between 100,000 and 10,000, 10,000 and 1,000, 1,000 and 500, or 501. That's how you win. You win being the best with the things they give you to better others. Right. And I think taking a negative hit with this side, it's not that bad, man. You could make a single transfer if you had to, but I wouldn't be shocked you couldn't get a green arrow with the right set of fixtures and a couple lucky starts with what you have right now. And where you're very, very lucky is you have starters all over the pitch. So you leave Darwin in, because let's be honest, if Darwin doesn't start tomorrow, he probably doesn't play.
Yeah.
Maybe he comes off the bench, and even if he does, the bastard could score a goal and an assist. Right. Or kick someone or kick a ball boy and get a red card. Either could happen. But I think that your side isn't as bad as you're making it out to be. I mean, Rashford, Almiron, Martinelli, and Salah are a midfield that can score goals, make plays. You have the best player in the game. You have a big-time scorer who is starting to become a differential as everyone sells off of him in Darwin. You still have Mitrovic if you want to start him. You have Andreas, and then you have, obviously, Trippier, White, and Cancelo. So you got to start Cancelo and just roll the dice and hope he starts. He didn't start the last match, which would make me think you have a better chance of him starting this one.
Yeah.
I actually think if I were you, I would actually be rolling the dice and holding on. So Trevor Utley jumps in and says, as much as I didn't want to miss the Mo revival, I just needed the cash and he had to go for this week. So it's fair for us to announce, and it's a perfect segue, that Trevor is actually the highest ranking scorer right now in all of our American Scouts or Contributor channel. I thought it was me, and I was going to do a victory lap and brag for taking over for a couple weeks. And then I looked at the standings and realized Trevor was 3 points ahead of me. So I hope your mistake of getting rid of Mo. Well, actually, it won't help me because I don't have Mo either. I hope whoever you brought in scores 3 less points than me, and I can take over first. But it's a good conversation because I think where Mo is right now is in complete limbo. I don't think the player knows exactly what all the formations are. I don't know that he knows exactly where his best areas to be on the pitch are to score goals, because it seems like often he is just a step or two off of where he would be in previous seasons. So I'm with you. I think Mo Salah right now is probably an out. And that's why I wouldn't move him if I were you. I know it sounds stupid. I think if there's a club he could score on right now, it might be Chelsea. And he loves to score a goal at Stamford Bridge, especially a beauty. So maybe tomorrow's the day where you hold on to him. But I think he actually is a player when you make those 2-3 moves. He's a guy that's got to go. Yeah. And as we transition into my team, I'll say this is probably the first or second time in the entire period I've played Premier League fantasy football that I have not had a Liverpool player in my side, let alone one starting. And I was kind of embarrassed when I looked at it and thought about it. But I mean, I did well. I mean, I had the green check mark. I moved up a couple 100,000 spots. I'm in the top 1,100 or 1,001,000 in the world. About 55 points off the top 100,000, which is where my goal is to get to by the end of the year. Very proud of myself for my decision to start Bueno. Obviously, I'm ride or die with Trippier, and I will be. My Kulusevski pick worked out. I'm not upset with starting Kevin De Bruyne in a double match week, though he only played once. Got me 5 points.
It was the right decision.
Yeah. I brought in Kane. My start of Leon Bailey is like what you do in fantasy to really make big moves.
Yep.
And it just drives me crazy because if it wasn't Doherty I brought in another big-time defender. Like, it could have been a monster week for me. But I'm comfortable with where my squad is now. The balance and the overall spending, like I said, I'm probably going to bring in Rashford for Martinelli. I'm holding on to James. I know it sounds stupid. Every week I think about transferring out Reece James, and then I don't find a defender I want to make more money or a double move that I need. And I keep thinking to myself, like, his price really isn't dropping that far anymore because no one else is selling or buying. Like, they either have him or they don't. And when he comes back, he'll probably be a player I want in my side immediately. So it's kind of in one of those, like, can I afford to keep stashing him on my bench while I keep getting green arrows every single week and not really wasting that much money? Yes, could I take 1.6 million and maybe jump somewhere? But I can't get to Bruno Fernandes. I can't get to, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
there's no specific leap I can see that I need to make right now.
Yeah, I feel like to go back to your point about the Liverpool players, I think in a way, being a fan of a certain team, like a true, real big fan, can really hurt you in this game. Because if we weren't big Liverpool fans, we wouldn't have held on to Trent for so long in the beginning. We wouldn't have held on to Mo for so long. We wouldn't have held on to Darwin for so long in some instances because because we see these guys through a different lens, we want them to do. We feel like, okay, this next game is the game. They're gonna break through, and it's gonna be fine. Whereas, you have a United fan playing this game, like, fuck, I don't need any Liverpool players. I'm not going to get any in my squad, and they're doing just fine without them. And I think so. In some ways, your fandom can sometimes really hurt you in this game unless you're able to play objectively. But that's hard to do because there's always going to be that piece of your heart that's like, no, I really can't go without any of these guys because these are the guys that I root for every day. How can I not have one on my team? I think if looking at defenders, because you've only got Trippier from Newcastle, someone like Schär, someone like Botman, someone like Byrne, they're all four of their defenders are in like the top 8 scoring of all defenders in the league this year in fantasy. So having a combination of any two of those guys for the whole year, and you've got two of the highest scoring defender, you have the highest scoring defender combo out of any team in the league. So, I mean, do I think that's sustainable? Possibly. I mean, we kind of, before the World Cup break, we kind of touched upon Newcastle and thought, is it possible for them to continue this streak? Will they still be this good? And I think they will still be this good. And looking at their fixtures, they've got Palace away, they've got West Ham at home, which they've been a joke. They've got Bournemouth away. So the next 3 weeks, you could see Newcastle clean all 3 weeks and having double cleans from some of your defenders on that back line would be fantastic. There's someone that I follow has done a Pope, Trippier, and Schär back line for like the last 12 weeks, and he's doing absolutely fine because they keep cleaning and they keep doing well. And Trippier is going to give you bonus points every week because he's a god. And then
he's unbelievable. He might be the best player. The best fantasy player this season might be Trippier by far.
Pound
per million.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. Well, between him and Odegaard really is what it comes down to.
Yeah, I just think you can find points in the midfield. I think for how weak defensive scoring is this year, having Trippier the way he is and just being guaranteed locked in. I mean, they've conceded, 11 goals in the entire season. Best or tied for best defensive side. They've been outstanding since Eddie Howe came in, even better since Nick Pope showed up in the summertime. I've thought about making a move to Pope at some point later in the season. I just, I got to be honest. Kepa's been a godsend. He's scored points. Even when they concede goals, he's up there in bonus points because he's constantly making lots of saves. Shot stoppers that don't get clean sheets make it so you don't lose money on keepers.
Yeah.
And that's what you need. Because there's all these keepers out there that get the 1 point. And there are times where Kepa concedes a goal and gets 3-4 points. So I just feel like he's an easy no-brainer at 4.5 right now, even though I don't love Chelsea's fixtures as they come up. So I might think about a double up with Pope. But I have actually thought about this week making the move off of, if I don't do the Rashford and -4 hit with James, I've thought about dropping Doherty out and bringing in either one of the Newcastle defenders and going with a Newcastle double up, because I do really like the Newcastle double up right now. I just feel like right now I have like a free lease on life because I have a $3.9 million defender that starts every single match and goes forward. And as much as people criticize Wolves, they don't concede a lot of goals. And since Lopetegui's come in, they've looked a side that actually understands how to play with a balance and attack and still defend. And I just really feel like I feel like he's a gem. And I think there's other Wolves players out there as we go forward that actually are going to be players that make a lot of sense for different sides. So if you were summing up your thought process going into this match week with 1 day to go, what are your concerns? I mean, we saw this week, right? Just this week, we saw Spurs take a 2-0 lead and absolutely fall apart. which for an Antonio Conte side is just it's baffling. I mean, it's the type of thing that usually makes Antonio Conte resign from the position that he's in. Because if there's one thing that Italian man doesn't like, it's stale wine. The second thing, a bad hairpiece. The third thing, losing. Like, you can almost see it on his face, though. He looks like he's a broken human after they lose.
Yeah.
So, Spurs assets are questionable. Son literally, but even offensively, Kane hasn't scored a ton recently. Son is a shell of himself. I mean, Kulusevski was really good for a match, but missed 3 matches before it, so he's an injury away. Richarlison looks like a world beater every moment he's on the pitch for Spurs, yet doesn't do anything statistically. But he looks great, which to me makes me afraid he's going to get a start for Son or Kulusevski eventually. So, like, I always feel like, and they have no midfield that's worth talking about. So, from a fantasy perspective, Harry Kane is worth having all the time because he's Harry Kane.
Right.
And any day he can score, on any day in England, he can score 5 goals, including 3 penalties, 2 of which probably aren't penalties. But he's Harry Kane. So, you keep him. Everyone else, to me, right now, is a crapshoot, including Kulusevski. But if you have him, you keep him on your side until he gets really cold. But there's so many sides struggling moving the ball forward. Do you think it's time to like start looking at the fringes, like breaking the template? Is it time to break the template?
I think it depends on where you're at, right? If you're in that top 2, 3, 400,000 of all players, I don't think it's time to break the template until you're towards the end where you really need to make that push, where you need that extra 15, 20 points to get you up to where you want to go. I think if you're sitting in that 2 to 6 million overall range and you want to get something out of this game, yeah, this is the time where you kind of just bust open the template and go, all right, who is everyone not picking, or who is everyone picking, and who do I get on my team from that list besides Haaland, because you have to have Haaland still. I know it's been not so perfect the last couple of weeks.
There's some cracks.
There are some cracks, but I don't think there's enough cracks for you to fall through yet. So, I mean, maybe, this is us maybe being chuffed about possibly City not being as great as they once were, which would be awesome, but also not so great because this is the year that Liverpool is not as great as they have been the last few years, which really sucks to look at. But nonetheless, I think it really depends on your positioning. Like in my case, I'm hovering right above 1 million. I want to stay in that. So I want to stay with the template for a little bit. If I was a little bit farther behind, I would try to make some kind of crazier moves to see what I can do. But so I think it's really relative to where you are in the standings and what you want to get out of the game. If you're here, if you just want to play fun, which you should be, and not taking it too seriously, then break up the template as much as you want to. Get in guys that you think that they're going to be fun to have, and go for it. But if you're someone that wants to have fun but still wants to compete, and for me at least, like bragging rights within our cup is what I'm fighting for now. Because I want to stay first. I want to be – I don't care if you score 300 more points than me by the end of the year. I want to still be first. So as long as I stay in the template, I feel like that's my best chance at winning that league, and kind of being in that place. So –
and that's a fair thing for our head-to-head league, and I'm the same way. I just look more at it. I'm trying to finish the top of all of us contributors in the American Scouser Cup and get as high up as I can. Clearly not anywhere near Pep. I would like some recommendations and tips. You can send them our way. But I think my biggest thing right now with all the moves and where I'm at with the breaking of the template is I don't know that the template's working. So I do think it's almost time to start deviating away from the template a little bit in transfers so that when you do wild cards, you can make a move and maybe have already brought in some of those players before those players become hot and they become the new template when the transfer or when the wild card time comes around match week 33, 34. Like that's usually around the time where most players wild card because they want to run into the final 5-6 match weeks. And there's a lot of doubles at the end of the year, and you can kind of plan them out. So I think I'd like to break from the template eventually. I think I kind of already have by not having any Liverpool players and then also not having Cancelo. Um, but I'm still on Kepa. I'm still on Martinelli. I still have quite a few players. And if I move off some of them, I'm talking about bringing other template players.
Right.
But I just think there is a time where like the player that moved to Mahrez in match week 15 and left him in since, they're a million places ahead of me.
Yeah.
And I'm at 1100. Like they're Pep. They're right up there in the top couple thousand because the guy's just been an absolute machine scoring points. And I'm so afraid of Pep's midfielders. And for whatever reason, I just never believe Mahrez will score when he's in my side. It's kind of like Mitrovic. Yet earlier in the podcast, I defended why you should keep him on your side because that's probably because he's in my side, and I know I can't move him out this week, so I have to have a reason to have him still there next week when you send me that screenshot. But I think the biggest thing for this week is going to be decisions around who you start, who you bench, who you captain, and how many transfers you make. We talked about the transfers. Are you going to captain Holland just because you captain Holland? Or are you going to look at your side and actually pick a player that makes the most sense?
I am going to captain Holland. I'm looking at it right now. I agree that I think United and Arsenal is going to be a high-scoring match. But looking at my Arsenal United assets in Ben White, Martinelli, and Rashford, I feel like Holland at home against Wolves makes more sense to me if he plays. That's a big thing too, because we don't know if Holland is going to get rotated out this weekend. He very well could be. There's a strong possibility that happens, which then it really puts the onus on you to make sure that you pay attention to your vice captain this week. So I think in this situation, I'll feel comfortable if I do a Holland and Rashford captaincy, because then if Holland doesn't play, I feel pretty good about Rashford being my vice captain over the likes of Martinelli, Salah, and Darwin. But if I'm keeping Darwin on my team, I don't want to. I know I'm so high on him. I think he'll do well tomorrow for some stupid reason in my head. But also, if he doesn't play and Holland doesn't play, I've screwed myself out of captaincy completely. But there's nothing's a given, right? I mean, Rashford could get hurt in training and tomorrow, and we might not see him over the weekend either. So everything is kind of a bit of a luck, a bit of a gamble. But I think right now I can't go off of Holland, and I'll just do Rashford or Martin or Salah as my vice, because if I'm spending 13 million on a player, he better be a captain in my head.
Well, I'm with you on that. If you're going to keep Salah this week, and I think you should, because I've told you already, I don't think you should make transfers. I would definitely vice captain Salah and or one of the other players. It would not be Darwin, obviously, because until you know a player's playing, you can't put an armband or the vice captain on him. I am not going to captain Holland this week. I'm nervous that he'll get a sit because he played both times this midweek. Pep likes to rotate. Alvarez is not only playing well, there's an argument he's actually playing better overall than Holland in the City side. And I actually think if they hadn't bought Holland and they just bought Alvarez might be the guy up near the top of the Golden Boot chase right now. Because I think he is the kind of false nine running into space. He is Sergio Aguero because, well, he's just a young player who's amazing from Argentina. Like, they found another stud.
Yeah. He fits that Pep team better than Holland does, but there's no denying what Holland's capable of doing. It's just that Alvarez is a much better fit in that system than Holland, because Alvarez can play with the ball at his feet. He can go out wide. Holland's kind of an amazing one-dimensional striker.
Absolutely.
He's a great
not a knock on him.
Right.
It's not a knock on him. He's going to start in my side. And I expect even if he doesn't, and this is my thing, the reason I can't captain him is I am afraid he might not get a start. And if he doesn't, I know Pep will put him on for 5 or 10 minutes at the end of the match to try to get him a goal because the kid loves goals that much and the manager loves his players that much.
Yeah.
And for that, and appearance bonuses and all the things that come with it. So I don't want a 2-point performance when that Spurs team just got humiliated the way they are. The way they were in that match on Thursday. Because Harry Kane could show up at Fulham and drop 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And I know that. Even with the way Fulham, because Fulham gives up chances. It's whether you finish your chances against Fulham. And I've always said this, as much as everyone like the mouth breather, the irritant, the way he looks, the way he acts, he doesn't get enough credit for what a classy footballer Harry Kane is all around. And on top of that, like as good of a footballer he is, which I think he's like top notch, like 4 or 5 in the Premier League, all around footballer.
Yeah.
He's a better goal scorer than that. Like he's that good.
Yeah.
Like to take over a match. And I think against a team like Fulham, I think he could do it. So I think, and it'll be hard for me. There was part of me that thought I would actually captain De Bruyne this weekend.
He has scored 4 in a game against Wolves before.
He has only scored once since Erling Haaland's been a teammate.
Crazy.
That's a big stat. He basically became the hockey goalie or the hockey assist person.
Yep.
We talked about earlier, and and he's still on my side, and I have this inkling like I might want to kind of roll my transfer. I kind of want to make a double move. I have all these different ideas, but the plan was always to drop to Mo after the double game week. But in another week, City has a double game week, so it's almost like how do I get rid of De Bruyne when I know he's going to play against Wolves because he sat against Spurs. But I also I've been really impressed with what Wolves have done defensively, and I could see them putting on a defensive performance against City and frustrating them.
Sure.
So I think in some ways it almost makes for Pep to bring Haaland on from the bench to try to win the match you need late. And I could be totally wrong. He could start him and, I'll look like a moron when he scores 4 goals and I don't have him as captain and my expected ownership drops me no matter what he scores. But I think I'm going to go with Harry Kane this week and just hope.
I like it.
And to be honest, Kane has outscored Haaland. I think it's 4 out of the last 5 game weeks.
And those are the kinds of moves, like you mentioned earlier, that can really pop you up just a couple 100,000 spots, or take you down 800,000.
And I think that's where people don't realize that it's also about the fact that if you make those type of moves, you don't have to break the template.
Just have to hit the right
to make big moves. You just have to make your opportunity and make a move. I saw someone last week like Captain Mahrez or triple Captain Mahrez, and they moved up like 2.5 million spots. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
What can happen with like one right decision or one lucky gamble. So we will wrap it up with this as we always do. Thanking all of you for watching, viewing, whether it was live or after the fact. We appreciate your viewership. Please follow us at American Scouser. Check out the website. We have Facebook pages. We have a group on LFC America. You can search and request to become a member. But please subscribe to our YouTube channel where we put out all this content. There's a podcast on Monday, a podcast on Thursday. We'll be getting back to weekly Premier League shows, as well as some additional evergreen shows and some spotlight highlights about how people became Liverpool supporters that are within our supporter community. So please subscribe to the channel, give it a like, give it a subscribe, share it with a friend. And if you do have feedback for us, please send it in anytime. Parting shots as we set aside after our 2-week hiatus, my buddy.
Congratulations on catching up and passing me. This I give you 4 more weeks before I leave you in the dust, and you don't see the other side again.
I love a confident young man. I also love to bring it back up that on January 20th, this man talked some shit he couldn't back up. So we'll see where it goes in 4 weeks.
Perfect.
We will see everyone else next week, and we hope to be back in our normal time slot on Thursday night because there's not the midweek matches that will throw us off. We'll try to stay consistent with that. Thursdays, 9 Eastern, 8 Central for those that live in Chicago. And for those on the West Coast, that is 3 hours before I start. No, I'm just kidding. It is 6 p.m. We will see you all next week. Have a great week. I hope all of your fantasy transfers work. Your hauls are even better. And if you take a hit, don't make it one like Matussa's.